say, prepare to be written. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. Yeah. Yeah. Hint some of these. Hint some of these. Almost there, and done. Now let's see how it looks so far.
If you've ever been told that your writing feels flat or melodramatic or like the emotion is there, but it's just not working, it's probably performing emotion instead of telling the emotional truth. Most writers don't struggle with writing emotion. They struggle with understanding it. And that difference matters more than you think. People are speeding down my street. Why, I don't know. It's literally a one-way side street with speed bumps all the way down it. Anyways, what emotional performance looks like is naming an emotion directly. He was angry. She was devastated. It also looks like using big language without actually grounding the actions around it. Or characters reacting in a way that they should rather than a way that they actually would. That is emotion written from the outside in. But emotional truth works differently. It lives in the body, in hesitation, in contradiction, in a way someone avoids a feeling rather than naming it. Emotional truth is written from the inside out. I learned this while writing Blue Lights, my debut novel. There's a lot of emotions in this book and in the next, coming out in March. But what I made sure of was when I was writing those emotions, I was writing how they felt instead of writing what they were. I didn't write fear by naming it. I wrote it by letting it change behaviors. My main character, Dante, he's afraid for most of the story. But he never says, I'm scared. Fear shows up in how much he watches others, how much he studies and is aware of his surroundings. It shows up in the ways of how quiet he becomes and how careful he is with Major, his best friend for the majority of the book. The emotional truth there is that throughout the story, his emotions are wavering. That through his actions, through his inner monologue, through the quiet moments, you can tell how he's feeling, even when he doesn't want to show it. Because Dante feels that although he's going through his emotions, and his emotions are valid, his fear comes second in comparison to what his best friend Major is going through. That suppression of the emotions that later on leads to this exhale, this is the emotional truth. It's not just him reacting off of emotions as soon as he feels them, but him thinking and rethinking if how he feels is as important as it does feel. And if it's worth the kind of attention and energy that it will draw away from his best friend's situation. Now, if I had written, Dante was afraid, that would have been more emotional performance. If I would have stated how he ran from fear, how he was shaking in his boots, it would have been emotional performance instead of emotional truth. Dante was scared, but Dante also knew that he couldn't always afford to be scared. Because in real life, we can't always let our emotions get the better of us. And we have to learn to work with each and every emotion. But his fear becomes a key point. But his fear becomes a key component to his character. It's what makes him so observant. Because he's always had to watch out for his best friend out of all the things that has happened to him. It's what makes him hesitant. Because in the past, when he and his friend would rush into things and make decisions without thinking, bad things happened. It made him protective. Because he knew that no one else was willing to protect his friend the way that he was. That's what made it feel real. That's what made my few readers really connect with these characters and really feel how they felt and believed in their feelings. And Major works the same way. When you are introduced to Major, off rip, he is introduced to you as a confident character. Literally the first line of the book. Major's confidence was always getting us into trouble. But as you get more into the story, you start to realize that Major's confidence wasn't the absence of fear. It was the protection, his armor. And he keeps moving through it. Major is a character in motion. He doesn't slow down long enough to name any emotions. Or to put names to the things that he might lose. Neither of them explain their emotions. Those emotions live inside of them. And that's something that readers can resonate with. We have to remember that our audience are no fools. They can put two and two together. They don't need you to paint a picture. Well, they do need you to paint a picture. But what they don't need from you is for you to tell them exactly how that picture is. Exactly what it means. Let them figure it out on their own. They can interpret what shaking hands means. They can interpret what a sweat on the brow means. They can interpret what a thump of the heart means. You don't need to tell them. Now, in writing A Little Broken, my second novel, that taught me something else. It taught me what emotions look like for someone who restrains himself from it. Nick, my main character here, his emotions show up as resistance. While the female main character, Irie, hers shows up in this soft gentleness. Love isn't announced here. For a good majority of the book, Nick doesn't even have the language for it. He doesn't even know what love was supposed to feel like. let alone when he's found it and how to label it. But as a reader, you feel it. You understand it. You understand what even he does not. That's another thing that I fear authors misinterpret sometimes when writing, is that they believe that in order for emotion to be read correctly, that their characters have to be emotionally intelligent. This is not the case. Nick is a character who has never experienced love. He grew up in the system, literally was one of the children who were dropped off at the fire station, no name or anything. He has never been loved. Going from foster home to foster home, from the time he was an infant to around 17 when he finally decided to leave. And he ran off to a small town to work on a college campus in the maintenance department. He hasn't experienced love before. But he still feels it, even if he doesn't know that he is. Now his love is expressed in the best way he knows how. In fixing things. In showing up when he said he would. And in leaving before he feels like he's going to be asked to leave. Or before he gets left himself. Different characters need different emotional languages. Dante, who grew up in a loving 2-parent household, talking about his emotions, he's going to be more open than Major, who grew up in a household that suppressed everything. Or more open than Nick, who never even had the time to consider his emotions because he was too busy running a foster home filled with boys who were breaking everything and leaving it up to him to fix. These characters, they live different lives. They've had different backgrounds. They express emotions differently, and they understand emotions differently. But it's all in the way in which the reader can connect with them, and all in the way in which we're not just labeling what they are feeling. This is a classic case of, you know what it is. It's the classic writing advice of show, don't tell, but especially when it comes to emotions. That's something that we want to show. We don't want to tell. Because emotions are physical. We can't hide them as well as we think we can. Perhaps if you're writing third person, this could be a bit more tricky, but there's a reason why we use language like a gut punch, a thump in the heart, a pain in the neck. If you look it up, different emotional nerves actually have reactions to our physical bodies. We feel a twist in our stomach when something feels wrong for a reason, because emotions are attached to our physical bodies. So, with this knowledge, and I do recommend looking it up. There's charts online. If I find one, I'll link it below. But that show you what emotion and where it shows up in the body. That's why when you're stressed out, you feel that tension in your neck. Now think about when you're writing a character who's going through a stressful moment. You want to talk about how their shoulders were tight, and once they're out of it, they can feel the release, or they take that deep breath and they can feel their shoulders sinking or that ache in the back of the neck. These are things that you want to include because these are things that are real. things that real people go through when we are experiencing emotions, whether we know it or not. Sometimes you don't even realize how stressed out you were until you get to a moment where you try to take a bite of a big sandwich and you realize that your jawline is super tight because you've been clenching your teeth because you've been stressed. And clenching your teeth is something that you do when you're stressed out. But you, as a human being, may have been denying this and not even realizing what you were doing, because in real life, we don't always have the time to sit and analyze our emotions. Life goes on even as we feel. And as writers, we have to figure out a way to weave the plot, the emotions, the inner monologue, and all those things together to create a compelling story. I'm not here to give you tips and tricks on how to write with better emotion. I want to give you permission to feel and feel fully. Let yourself not only feel every emotion, but to take yourself through every emotion and to recognize why this is showing up and where this is showing up. When you're watching that sad scene in the movie or that loving scene in the movie, don't stop yourself from crying. Cry. Figure it out. Why am I crying here? What is causing me to have this emotion? And while I'm having this emotion, what am I physically feeling? There's this tightness in the throat that clogs up, that little lump that appears that makes it harder to breathe when you're about to have a really hard cry. When you're laughing, think about what is it that makes you feel that way? What about it makes that lightness in your chest? The way that your ears will rise just slightly. That tension that pulls to the sides of your face. That soreness in your cheeks. Or those hard laughs that repeated times with friends. When you get that awful cramp in the side of your stomach that won't leave you alone, but the pain somehow makes you laugh even more. Emotions are in us. And the biggest thing that we can study when it comes to writing people is ourselves. So when you're scared, when you're lonely, when you're happy, when you're sad, when you're angry, stop. Take a moment and see what that truly feels like. And try to remember that. Or for the people who journal it, write it down. Because living your life and living it fully and experiencing what it is to be human, that's what's going to make you a better writer. Living your life, that way you can better document life. So get uncomfortable and sit with it when you do. Instead of just trying to rush past every emotion, because guess what? We're human. We're supposed to feel everything. Nowhere in our design was it ever said that we were supposed to be happy all the time. So ask yourself, what does this emotion make me do? What am I trying to not feel here? Let those answers shape your emotional scenes. Because you can't make readers feel something that you haven't felt yourself. Emotional truth doesn't start on the page. It starts with your inner monologue. And once you start listening to that, that's when your writing starts to change. And here at the inner monologue, this is where we work on developing both our writing and our inner monologues. Now, if you want to check out a bit of Blue Lights, because the sequel is releasing soon in just 2 months, on my newsletter, I'm actually giving out PDFs of the first couple of chapters of Blue Lights. So if you want to check out my writing, if you are like, she doesn't know what she's talking about, because let's be real, most of us on the internet don't know what we're talking about. But I am an English teacher. I did go to school in literary arts. I have a minor in literary arts. I've taken every creative writing and literary class that my school had to offer. And I've been writing since I was a child. I've been through the trials and tribulations. These are by far not the first books that I've written. These are just the first books that I've published. So if you want to check out a bit of Blue Lights in honor of the release of Black Lights, look at this beautiful cover. My newsletter is going to be linked down below. So please join my newsletter and get you a copy of the first couple chapters of Blue Lights. If you go to Goodreads or Amazon and check out the reviews, I know that you're not going to regret it. So, with that, I leave you. But remember to listen to your inner monologue.